September 15, 2019, 8:52 p.m., Wild Basin Trailhead, Rocky Mountain National Park, Colorado. A 911 call reports 2 overdue hikers. The truck is parked, unlocked, and silent. What happened to Mark Alvarez and his adult son, Lucas? 5 years later, a high country survey will expose a hidden trace and force a final search. The clock started here, on this lot, under failing light. One fact is clear: nothing about this is routine. What did they plan and what did they miss? Karen Reed called at 8:52 p.m. She had waited 2 hours past the agreed return. Mark had promised to be home by 6:30. Their plan was clean: 3 days out, light snow expected, back before dark. Dispatch reached rangers within minutes. Ben Holloway took the lead. Officers secured the lot at 9:21. A blue Toyota Tacoma sat nose-in near the kiosk. The cab was unlocked. Keys in the center console. No gear in the bed. The register showed Alvarez plus L. Alvarez, 3-day backcountry. Time-stamped 2:21 p.m., September 12th. The handwriting looked steady. Detective Olivia Park arrived just before 10 o'clock. She photographed the interior and tire prints. No signs of a struggle. No blood. No broken glass. One paper coffee cup in the holder. A folded park map. Rangers pushed a hasty search that night to Copeland Falls and the Bluebird Lake cutoff. They found boot prints that matched Mark's size near the main junction. Another set aligned with Lucas's model. The prints left the established track toward a faint social path. The detour mattered. It placed them off the popular loop before the storm. Weather turned fast on September 13th. Sleet started at 3:40 p.m. By 7:10 p.m., surface ice formed on shaded slabs. K9 units worked at first light on the 14th. Dogs trailed scent for a mile, then milled and lifted their heads. Handlers logged, scent loss consistent with storm and terrain funneling. Helicopters flew grid lines that afternoon. The canopy blocked most angles. Ground teams moved by sectors. They cleared known hazards: creek crossings, talus benches, and a narrow ledge above Ouzel Creek. They flagged nothing definitive. A thermal drone swept meadows near Sand Beach Lake at dusk. Readings showed only elk. Karen gave a timeline and consented to device checks. Mark texted her at 2:07 p.m., September 12th. Signal fades after Calypso. Lucas messaged his girlfriend, Paige Lou, at 2:12, heading higher. Dad says 3 days max. A fuel stop in Lions hit at 12:31 p.m. Receipts listed isobutane, paracord, and water tabs from days earlier. Detective Park reviewed financials. Mark carried about $26,000 in credit card debt and a $22,000 personal loan. A court hearing on late support was set for September 19th. Co-workers said he had been tense. A neighbor saw him load 2 storage bins on September 9th. The data suggested planning, not panic. Rangers widened the primary search box to 52 square miles by September 18th. They requested mountaineering units to check gullies east of Thunder Lake. Ice on shaded rock slowed progress. Teams left wands and tape to mark traverses. A storm watch forced a stand down for 24 hours. When skies cleared, tracks were gone. By day 7, the numbers were blunt. Over 120 personnel hours per day. 0 confirmed clues beyond the truck, prints, and register entry. The working theories split. 1. Accident with concealment by snow and rockfall. 2. Deliberate move off-trail to a pre-selected pocket. Both fit the evidence, neither closed the case. Karen stood at the trailhead each sunset and waited for radios to go quiet. She kept her answers strict when cameras appeared. Find them. That's all. Rangers promised to continue while conditions allowed. On paper, the search stayed open. In practice, resources shifted back to routine calls. In week 2, Park's team built a profile of Mark's backcountry habits. He tracked weather, repaired gear for friends, and read about long-term camps. A receipt showed a compact solar panel. That line item made investigators pause. One fact was not in dispute. 2 adults entered this range on September 12th and did not walk out. 5 years later, a new eye in the air would force the next move. What did the mountains hold back that first week? Detective Olivia Park requested Mark Alvarez's bank and phone records on September 18, 2019 at 9:12 a.m. A judge signed the order before noon. The first pulls showed late payments, cash advances, and new purchases. The amounts were not huge alone. Together they formed a pattern. Over 6 weeks, Mark bought a compact solar panel, a silnolene tarp, 2 isobutane canisters, and a water filter. He also purchased 50 feet of 11mm cord from a gear shop in Boulder. Receipts placed him there on September 7th at 3:18 p.m. None of those items were in the truck. Karen Reed sat with Park that afternoon. She brought paper files and consented to more searches. She confirmed a hearing on September 19th for late child support. She confirmed Mark had asked about early withdrawal from a small retirement account on September 10th. He also called in sick on September 11th. The supervisor in Longmont reported that Mark had been quiet. He worked late the week before the trip and asked for unpaid time. Neighbors filled in gaps. A woman across the street saw Mark move 2 gray storage bins into the Tacoma on September 9th around 7:40 p.m. A teenager reported hearing a drill or impact driver from the garage the same evening. Security video from a gas station in Lyons showed Mark and Lucas at 12:31 p.m. on September 12th. Mark paid for fuel and a pack of hand warmers. Lucas carried a small black dry bag. Park flagged insurance. Mark held a $250,000 life policy through a union plan. The beneficiary was Lucas. There was no secondary beneficiary on file. If Lucas could not be located, the process would stall. The company noted the open missing persons case and requested updates. This was standard. The timing, however, added pressure. Search teams kept working. Rangers flew the western edge of the box near Thunder Lake and Eagle Lake. They repeated passes at 500 and 700 feet AGL. The canopy stayed dense. On the ground, a mountaineering unit checked 3 steep gullies known for ice. They found torn bark and 1 old glove that did not match the family's gear list. GPS tracks showed coverage, but coverage was not the same as certainty. The device review produced more leads. Mark's last known call pinged a tower near Allenspark at 2:03 p.m. on September 12th. Lucas's phone stopped transmitting by 3:11 p.m. near Copeland Lake. Investigators located a short message that never sent from Mark's phone at 4:02 p.m. Signal gone. Back later. It sat unsent in the outbox. That timestamp lined up with the sleet front that moved in the next day. Park interviewed Paige Liu on September 20th at 10 a.m. Paige described Lucas as careful and practical. He always set waypoints and logged mileage. She said Lucas admired his father's skills but disagreed about risk. 3 texts from Lucas the week before hinted at a debate. Dad thinks we can push higher. Snow in forecast. I want safer line. 3 days max. The push and pull sounded normal, but it mattered now. Financial reports added one more stressor. Mark received a notice on August 30th that a wage garnishment could start by late September. He appealed, but the letter was firm. Park did not call this a motive. She called it context. The context made her look harder at the gear purchases and the storage bins. It also made her look for caches. People do not carry everything on day one if they plan to stay hidden. Volunteers searched pullouts along Highway 7 for signs of a staging point. One driver remembered a blue Tacoma parked at a scenic turnout on September 8th. No plate was recorded. A game camera 2 miles off-trail captured a figure with a tarp-shaped roll at 6:09 a.m. on September 9th. The image was grainy, but the shape of the object matched the tarp brand Mark bought. It was a thin lead, not proof. On September 22nd, rangers scaled back to targeted sweeps. The official search remained active but constrained by weather and safety. Karen authorized a private team to run a weekend grid with fresh K9 units. The dogs showed interest near a less-used social path east of the main trail. The scent rose, stalled, and drifted. Handlers noted terrain funnels and competing odors. They marked the area and withdrew at dusk. Park summarized the case status that night. 2 adults entered on September 12th at 2:21 p.m. A storm degraded scent and tracks on the 13th. The vehicle offered no scene of attack. Purchases suggested planning beyond a weekend. There was no ransom, no clear enemy, no final message. The case was open, but the trail was thin. Before closing her report, she added one line for the next phase: reassess off-trail micro-pockets using aerial platforms when feasible. If cases like this interest you, subscribe so you do not miss the next verified update. We focus on time, place, and evidence, not rumors. A quiet detail in an old photo would later change the search map entirely. By early 2020, the case file had more pages but no answers. Snow sealed several gullies through April. When trails reopened, volunteers restarted searches on weekends. Karen Reed worked full shifts, then drove to Wild Basin to meet them. She kept the focus on facts. She asked for maps, timestamps, and GPS tracks. She avoided cameras unless updates were verified. Detective Olivia Park ran a yearly review every June. She checked new tips and compared them to the original timeline. She met with Ranger Ben Holloway to refine search boxes. They looked at slope angle, tree cover, and wind patterns. They treated scent behavior as data, not luck. Park consulted a K-9 instructor from Larimer County. He explained how a downslope wind can lift a trail and push it sideways. It matched handler notes from September 2019. A private investigator compiled weather logs for the first month of the disappearance. He noted a warm spike on September 16th that caused afternoon melt. He marked refreeze overnight. He flagged dates when soft snow could hide tracks in minutes. He concluded that a fall or shelter could have been covered without leaving visible sign. The conclusion was not dramatic. It was useful. University hikers ran a memorial trek each September. They placed small markers at safe points. They photographed angles that had not been documented in 2019. One student captured a faint cairn near a contour line east of the main trail. The rock stack was low and irregular. Rangers checked it and found no clear link to the Alvarez party. The photo stayed in the file. Digital work improved. A geospatial volunteer layered satellite passes from 2018 to 2021. He looked for shape anomalies under canopy edges. He marked 7 candidates, then eliminated 5 as cabins outside the park. 2 points remained inside steep terrain with heavy cover. Both sat near drainage cuts that were not on tourist maps. Getting to either would require technical access or a line drop. Park reviewed Mark's online activity again with a newer tool. Search history showed visits to forums about long-term camps and water collection. The dates were late August and early September 2019. He watched a video about Silnolan shelter designs and folding tarps to break up edges. The tarp brand matched a receipt. She noted the match and moved on. She did not overreach. Phone data offered a small surprise. A routing app on Lucas's device had offline tiles for a zone beyond Thunder Lake. The tiles were downloaded on September 10th at 8:12 p.m. from his apartment Wi-Fi. That did not prove intent to travel there. It showed someone prepared for poor reception. Paige Lou confirmed Lucas often saved maps. She also confirmed he favored established routes. In 2021, an outdoors club organized a grid near Ouzel Creek. They used climbing helmets, radios, and strict spacing. They found an old paracord length at a snag. The diameter was 9 millimeters, not 11. The color and sheath did not match Mark's purchase. They logged the find and bagged it. Park sent it for testing. Results showed weathering inconsistent with a recent placement. It likely predated the case. A community member brought trail camera footage in spring 2022. One clip from September 2019 showed a person passing with a narrow rectangular object. The timestamp was 6:11 a.m., 2 days before the entry at the register. The location was off-trail. The object could have been a folded tarp or a mat. The face was not clear. Clothing was neutral. Rangers revisited the area and found old boot scuffs. The scuffs were degraded beyond dating. A second look at financials found a small storage locker in Longmont. The contract started in May 2019 and ended in October. The facility kept no interior images. The manager remembered nothing unusual. The unit was empty by the time police learned of it. This added a question but not an answer. Park commissioned a terrain model of likely micro-pockets. Analysts defined pockets as spaces shielded from line of sight and wind, with water within 200 meters. The model produced 9 zones within a 6-square-mile block. 6 had been searched from the edges. 3 required aerial access or a high-angle team. Weather and staffing delayed any attempt. By late 2023, the profile of the case was stable. 2 adults entered the backcountry on September 12, 2019. Equipment purchases suggested more than a weekend. A storm erased scent and sign. There was no ransom demand, no violent scene at the truck, no verified sighting after day 1. The remaining targets were steep, hidden, and expensive to reach. Karen kept a simple routine. She attended the briefings she was invited to. She did not argue for theories. She argued for thoroughness. She told Park she could live with a hard truth. She could not live with a lazy one. Park agreed. The file stayed open. In December 2023, a state wildlife team announced off-season aerial surveys for animal counts near the same basin. Park sent one email with a single request: notify if any artificial shapes appeared under canopy. The email would matter later. On August 19, 2024 at 2:43 p.m., a research drone from Colorado State University lifted over a closed drainage northeast of Thunder Lake. The operator was Dr. Naomi Patel. She and 2 graduate students were counting elk from the air. They flew under a wildlife permit and filed a route with park authorities. Patel used a quadcopter with a 4K payload and optical zoom. Wind was moderate from the west. Visibility was good. At 2:47 p.m., Patel paused the feed and zoomed. A rectangle appeared under the canopy. The edges were unnaturally straight. A ripple moved across the surface like stretched fabric under light wind. Patel marked the coordinates and recorded 60 seconds of video. She noted the altitude and battery level. She captured stills at different angles. She radioed the field ranger on duty and requested a review. Ranger Ben Holloway received the call at 3:12 p.m. He was 3 miles away on a patrol loop. He asked Patel to hold position and sent the GPS pin to Incident Command. Detective Olivia Park, still assigned to the Alvarez case, was notified at 3:29 p.m. She drove to the CSU field truck near the trailhead and watched the recorded segment. She saw a lean-to shape, a fire ring outline, and a suspended object that looked like a bear hang. Authorization for a technical entry came at 5:02 p.m. The terrain was steep, with deadfall and loose rock. The team scheduled the insertion for 9 a.m. the next day. Overnight, Park compared the coordinates with the micro-pockets model drafted in 2023. The rectangle sat inside Pocket 4. It was one of the 3 zones that needed aerial or high-angle access. It had not been searched from within. On August 20th at 8:58 a.m., a 5-person team staged above the site. They included a park medic, a rope specialist, and a crime scene tech. Patel relaunched the drone for live overwatch. The descent took 20 minutes. The first ground report came at 9:27 a.m. The voice was clear on the radio. Lean to present. Appears reinforced. Fire pit with arranged stones. Food hang line intact. Photographs confirmed a long-term camp. The shelter frame used cut branches lashed with cord. The tarp was silnolin, green-gray, with repairs using duct tape. A small solar panel was secured to a limb with paracord. The fire ring held compact ash layers. A flat stone served as a cook platform. The team found a bare canister tucked under brush. The brand matched a purchase in Mark Alvarez's receipt stack. A sealed dry bag sat under a rock shelf. Inside was a notebook sealed in a freezer bag and wrapped in cloth. Pages were intact. The first date on the top page read September 12, 2019. The last visible date read February 22, 2020. The tech photographed every page in place before removal. Park did not read on scene. She maintained chain of custody. Clothing items were present but limited. A wool cap. A pair of gloves with worn palms. A metal mug. A folding knife. A spool of cord with several feet used. There were no sleeping bags in view. The team swept within a 20-meter radius. They located small cairns leading upslope. The cairns were low and aligned with a narrow shelf that looked over a hidden basin. The path had minor scuffing but no fresh prints. The camp had been built with care. It used shade, slope, and wind cover. It could not be seen from popular trails. It sat near a small seep that pooled in wet periods. Water was within in easy carry. The site fit the modeling. It also fit the purchase trail. The solar panel, the tarp, the cord, and the canister were not random. Park logged a second observation. A short, improvised rack hung from 2 branches. It could dry clothing or meat. This lined up with searches on Mark's browser history. He had watched a video about food storage and smoke management in September 2019. The date matched pre-trip planning. It showed intent to stay longer than a weekend. It did not yet prove a crime. By 11:10 a.m., the team completed a first pass. No human remains were near the shelter. No obvious sign of violence. The notebook was the key. Park authorized a controlled read in the field to assess urgency. The medic opened to the first page and read entries verbatim to the recorder. The tone was plain. It tracked daily tasks, weather, and rations. It listed distances walked, water collected, and gear repairs. It mentioned a debate about signaling aircraft after a flyover in late December. The entry on February 17th noted an accident near an icy shelf. It described a fall from several meters and severe pain. It recorded efforts to stabilize and a plan to seek help. The next entries were short and strained. Dates moved forward by 1 day. Then the pages stopped. The final line asked that a message be delivered to family if found. The text was brief and direct. Park halted the read and ordered a scene expansion. Teams flagged the cairn line to the shelf. A secondary grid formed above the basin. Communications stayed calm. There was no drama on the air. Only times and distances. Patel landed the drone to swap batteries. She lifted again at 11:41 a.m. and pushed beyond the shelf with a cautious angle. What the camera caught 30 seconds later forced everyone on the net to stop talking. The drone dipped over the shelf at 11:42 a.m. A pale shape lay against dark stone. The camera locked and zoomed. A human skull was visible among flattened brush. A light wind shifted leaves, then stilled. Ranger Ben Holloway marked the grid and set anchor points. The technical team advanced in short moves. They photographed, measured, and called out distances. No one rushed. Detective Olivia Park ordered a split operation. 1 unit processed the campsite. The rope team documented the shelf and the slope below. Dr. Naomi Patel kept the drone steady for overwatch. A medic confirmed the presence of human remains. The jaw showed dental work. The shape of a parka shoulder appeared under scattered rocks. No wildlife activity was current. By 1:06 p.m., the team recovered skeletal elements and clothing from the ledge. A cairn sat 3 feet away, aligned toward the basin. The bagged items included a watch, a belt, and a phone case. The case had no phone. A folded paper listed food rations by date. The last entry was February 18, 2020. A small paracord loop was fixed to a scrub root above the ledge. Back at the camp, Park authorized a thorough read of the notebook. The first entries matched dates, weather, and routine. The tone was clinical. Mark Alvarez described water collection, game trails, and calorie counts. He logged distances and temperatures. He mentioned a flyover on December 27th and a discussion about signaling. Lucas favored contact. Mark postponed. The decision point was clear and documented. The entry for February 17, 2020 was abrupt. Fall on ice near shelf. Lucas dropped about 30 feet. Severe pain. Trouble breathing. Possible rib injuries. The next lines listed steps: shelter, heat, fluids, and watch schedule. He wrote that he tried for a higher signal point and failed. He described returning before dark. The page ended with, "Try again at first light." The entry for February 18th was shorter. It noted shallow breathing and confusion. It recorded time intervals for checks. It noted limited snowmelt and poor traction above the shelf. The following page carried a request: if found, tell family. The handwriting was cramped and uneven. The last date written was February 22nd. The line trailed but remained legible. It read, "I can't leave him alone any longer." The coroner's team received the remains that evening. Dental comparison identified Lucas Alvarez through records provided by his dentist in Longmont. The preliminary forensic review found fractures consistent with a fall onto rock from moderate height. There were no tool marks, no binding, and no defensive trauma. The clothing matched items seen in social photographs from September 2019. The watch was a gift noted in messages to Paige Liu. The rope team then followed the cairn line away from the shelf. They tracked faint scuffs along a spur ridge. A second drop-off cut the slope 1.5 miles from the camp. A faded cord hung from a snag above it. Below, searchers found weathered fabric and a belt buckle. Human remains lay on a scree fan. The position suggested a deliberate descent and a final step into space. The scene was quiet and intact. Identification of the second set of remains came 2 days later. Dental records and a healed finger fracture confirmed Mark Alvarez. The medical examiner labeled the manner of death as suicide. Time since death matched late February or early March 2020, consistent with weather and journal entries. There was no sign of third-party involvement. There was no ballistic or sharp force evidence. The conclusions were formal and restrained. Park presented the findings to Karen Reed on August 23, 2024. She kept the meeting short and factual. Karen listened, asked about dates, and signed property forms. She declined media questions. She did authorize the release of a statement affirming the identification and thanking searchers. Paige provided a simple note honoring Lucas and his field skills. Ranger Holloway closed by confirming the site would not be disclosed to the public. Insurance and legal issues moved next. The carrier reviewed the policy and the timeline. They noted the absence of fraud claims against Karen or Lucas. The company declined to pursue recovery. The child support docket closed after proof of death. Debts attached to Mark ended with him. There was no criminal case to file. Detective Park filed her final case summary on August 30, 2024. Cause of death for Lucas: multiple injuries from an accidental fall. Cause of death for Mark: suicide. Contributing factors included weather, terrain, and an extended off-trail stay. The file included the notebook, site photos, GPS tracks, and the equipment list. It ended with a technical note recommending policy updates for aerial searches in heavy canopy. The question that remained was not legal. It was human. Why did an experienced father choose silence when time was running out? Karen Reed chose a small service in Longmont on October 5, 2024. She invited only family, a few friends, and the search leaders. There was no press. Detective Olivia Park stood near the back with Ranger Ben Holloway and Dr. Naomi Patel. The ceremony stayed brief. Names, dates, and thanks. Karen spoke for 4 minutes. She did not assign blame. She asked for better planning and faster help for families under pressure. She sat down and let the room be quiet. 2 days later, Park released the public report. It ran 30 pages with exhibits. The first section set out the timeline from September 12, 2019 to August 20, 2024. The next section summarized the notebook entries and the recovery sites. The final section listed recommendations. The language was controlled and specific. It was not a story. It was a record. The case also produced 2 unexpected items. A data extraction from Lucas's watch revealed brief GPS points on February 17, 2020, at 2:41 p.m. and 3:03 p.m. The watch attempted to acquire satellites twice, then failed. The locations matched the shelf area within 30 meters. The timestamps aligned with the notebook and the weather report that day. The second item was a single voice memo found on Mark's old flip phone. It was recorded on September 11, 2019, at 10:12 p.m. at home in Longmont. The clip was 32 seconds. It contained a short note to himself about supplies and a reminder to pack the small panel. There was no confession. Park released a transcript and retained the audio. Colorado State University made a narrow decision that month. They approved a pilot program to share anonymized canopy screenshots with search and rescue under a strict protocol. Coordinates would be redacted in public versions. Full data would be restricted to officials. Patel trained rangers to mark geospatial anomalies and to pair them with ground truth rapidly. Holloway updated the park's aerial request checklist. It now prioritized micro-pockets after 48 hours without clues. Karen redirected her focus. She asked an attorney to close estate matters and to finalize insurance issues. She donated a portion to a small fund at the university under a neutral name. The fund supported emergency travel money and gear repairs for students with family crises. She asked that the description avoid her family's names. The school agreed. Paige Liu pledged to mentor students who planned fieldwork. She offered a plain message: tell someone your exact plan, even if you think you do not need to. Park faced a harder conversation with the online audience that had followed the case. She agreed to one local interview in Boulder on October 12th. She avoided speculation and used specific terms. She repeated that there was no sign of assault, kidnapping, or third-party sabotage. She explained how a storm could erase sign within hours. She described how an off-trail camp could remain invisible to air searches under dense cover. She said the choices in 2019 mattered, but the system could also do better. The Park Service reviewed 3 policies. First, they raised the threshold for technical access to steep pockets when 2 conditions were met: persistent scent loss and early season snow. Second, they broadened the rules for academic drone coordination during missing person incidents. Third, they created a short course on anchor safety in winter conditions. The course emphasized angles, surface prep, and testing under load. It partnered with climbing gyms in Estes Park in Boulder. It was free. One detail triggered community debate. The notebook described a disagreement about signaling during a December flyover. Parishioners from Mark's church defended his caution. Friends from Lucas's program argued that the helicopter could have saved them. Park refused to litigate a winter decision in a studio. She kept to the record. She noted the entry. She noted the risks. She left it there. The storage locker raised questions that never closed. The unit was empty when discovered. Receipts tied purchases to early September. A neighbor remembered bins in a truck bed. There was no video of what went inside the unit. There was no list of contents. It remained a missing piece that did not change the outcome. In November, Holloway walked the perimeter one last time before snow. He removed tape and wands and left the land unmarked. The coordinates stayed sealed. The cairns were dismantled. The site blended back into rock and wood. The file will live in a cabinet for years. It will read like a caution about pressure, silence, and time. 2 adults entered a beautiful and unforgiving place. One accident turned a private plan into a final record. There is no romance in that line. There is a lesson. Tell someone everything, take the safer path, and ask for help early.